morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And one of the reasons why it is a failed state is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. A few weeks ago, the country celebrated its 45th year of independence. It is tragic that in 45 years, in this day and age, the country has still failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Zanu PF, the ruling party, has blatantly rigged elections these last 45 years. And here is Mnangagwa, the posting after rigging the 2023 elections, blatantly rigging the 2023 elections.
Vana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidza nekuchikanganisa. Ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai. You are doing correct things for your country. Homu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
And one of those he was dismissing with contempt that it is nonsense. Those who had condemned the election process as not being free, fair, and credible was none other than SADC and the AU election observers. What is annoying in this case is that we have got a situation here where our own regional body, and the continental body, election observers, forget the European Union, the Americans, and all others, election observers. They are the ones who condemned the 2023 elections as being flawed. And these are the same people Mnangagwa is saying deja vu. He wants to ignore them. Doesn't care what they said. That is the tragedy of the country. We're going to ignore everybody, the whole world. Then who are we going to listen to? Here is Dr. Nevas Mumba, was the chairperson of the SADC election observer team that condemned those elections.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations that, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission, Commission and things which happen in many other countries, But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, there is a comparison, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report. And then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, that are coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of the elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election, and they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
Well, he was absolutely right. After having produced a damning report on the 2023 elections, many people have rightly asked, why did SADC fail to deny the Zanu PF political legitimacy? I have given two reasons for it. The first one is that the ordinary Zimbabweans themselves participated in these flawed elections in their numbers. Nearly 2 million voted for Chamisa. That's 44% of the turnout. Chamisa had conned them to participate by telling them that CCC was going to win big, and he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. And the people themselves made the mistake of believing the idiotic lies. So that was number one. Number two, the opposition leaders themselves, the CCC leaders themselves, participated in these flawed and illegal elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they'll be giving Zanu PF legitimacy. But they did so regardless, out of greed. And even when SADC and the AU had produced their damning report, the winning CCC leaders, like David Coltart, Fadzai Mahere, and many others, went ahead and took up their gravy train seats. Forget the infighting that took place soon after that, where Tsavangu recalled some of those who had won the seats. The recall was done when the damage had already been done. The damage of participating and then taking up the seats. But the other third reason that I must be mentioned is that SADC, and I believe SADC, would have still nonetheless denied Zanu PF political legitimacy, taking into consideration the damning report from SADC, if ANC of South Africa, which was the ruling party at the time, had not come out very strongly before the elections themselves even in support of Zanu PF. ANC had made it clear that the party would support Zanu PF under the pretext that Zanu PF was under pressure from the West. The sanction that the West had imposed on the regime was to force regime change. Here is the ANC Secretary General in November 2022 speaking at an ANC Congress on the issue of the sanctions imposed by the West on Zanu PF.
America will finish you. Even here in Zimbabwe, he stood firm. They wanted Mugabe to be changed overnight, and then they attack us on what is South Africa's quiet diplomacy is a problem. And then we said, we don't, that governments must be changed with military power. Because America can move right from Botswana in the afternoon, Mugabe will be finished. Because they are, yes, they move in the afternoon. By dinner, everything will be sorted. We opposed the sanctions and then to the growth of Zimbabwe and everything. And removed Mugabe. What is the state of Africa? Into power. They will never be satisfied. Zimbabwe is still
Sorry about the sound quality of that video clip. Well, what the Secretary General was saying there is that the Americans and the West in general had imposed the sanctions on Zimbabwe for the purposes of regime change. ANC was not going to accept regime change in Zimbabwe on the basis that it was initiated by the Western. And yet ANC knew that Zanu PF has been rigging elections ever since the country's independence, in fact, in 1980. They knew that. And they knew that going up to the 2023 elections, no meaningful democratic reforms had been implemented in Zimbabwe. And therefore, then the country was certain to have another rigged election. ANC did not mind that. And so we found ourselves in this untenable situation where ANC is, and this was November 2022, was already saying it was not going to accept regime change in Zimbabwe, as if it was already certain that there was going to be
America will finish you.
My apologies again on that one. Seems to have some technical problems tonight. So we have a situation here where ANC is insisting that it will not accept regime change in Zimbabwe, knowing fully well that Zanu PF
Mugabe will be finished.
Has been rigging elections and was going to rig elections because no meaningful reforms had been implemented at this stage. And when SADC's own election observer team condemned the election processes in Zimbabwe, as we heard from Dr. Nevas Mumba, who was the chairperson of that SADC, ANC was one of the parties in the SADC region, nations in the SADC regions, that ignored that report completely because President Cyril Ramaphosa and a high-powered ANC delegation attended Mnangagwa's inauguration. Many of the other SADC leaders boycotted the swearing in of Mnangagwa. ANC did not. And thus giving its endorsement of the result. I think when history comes to be written, the world will know the damaging role that ANC has played in Zimbabwe politics for the last decade, maybe even 2 decades, ever since South Africa's own independence in 1994. ANC was determined to keep Zanu PF in power, knowing fully well Zanu PF was rigging elections. And Zanu PF was able to rig elections and get away with it again and again, and leaving the country more deeply entrenched in this corrupt, tyrannical Zanu PF one-party dictatorship. And the ordinary people of Zimbabwe have paid dearly for it. Last year, 2024, South Africa had their own elections. South African elections ever since 1994 have been free, fair, and credible. And ANC failed to retain a clear majority and has since been forced to go into a coalition with some of the other parties in that country. South Africa itself has benefited from the holding of free, fair, and credible elections. And yet, the ANC party has played a key role in denying the people of Zimbabwe the opportunities to hold free, fair, and credible elections too. Many people have asked why did they do that? The reason was very simple. ANC as a ruling party viewed itself as a partner with Zanu PF. This is a party of liberation. And they were worried that if there was to be a regime change in Zimbabwe and the economy was to significantly improve, the people of South Africa would see that as a green light for them to also seek regime change in South Africa. And so the 2024 elections, in which ANC, for the first time since 1994, lost its majority, was a shock to ANC. But at least the country had free, fair, and credible elections. And the result was a true reflection of the democratic will of the people of South Africa. Something that the people of Zimbabwe have been denied by Zanu PF. And it is tragic to note that the ANC party in South Africa has played a key role in allowing Zanu PF to get away with rigged elections. Someday, history will be written and the full role of South Africa's ANC government in keeping Zanu PF in power will be known. Food for thought. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.